I have been reviewing HiFi for around 8 years now, and I've looked at a lot of products in that time. So it's extra telling to me when I know I should stop listening and get my camera out and start a video's production, because these videos don't make themselves, but instead I let my heart rule my head, and I don't. I just keep listening. I keep listening, you know, day after day to more and more music, because that is telling to me that I'm really enjoying the sound of the system, and I don't want to have to break it down. And that has been the case for the whole time the Audio Solutions Figaro M2 speakers has been here. So it's very telling to me. And it's quite a punchy thing to come out in November and name a speaker as your speaker of the year. But I'm doing it not just because of the Figaro's sound, but because of their flexibility, because of their scalability, because of their customization, and because they are just that little bit different. And I have no affiliate links down below in the comment section. There's nothing like that going on here. I'm naming them as my speaker of the year because I just really appreciate them. Audio Solutions might be a new speaker manufacturer to you, but they have been in business since 2011, and they make a very wide, broad range of hi-fi speakers, all in-house in Vilnius in Lithuania. And the Figaro M2 sits slap bang in the middle of the entire range. And I always find that's a great spot in a range for getting, you know, huge bangs for the buck. But these are high-end speakers with a high price tag, but not crazy high considering what they do and what they can offer. And they don't cost as much as Kef's reference-free Meta speakers, for example, and they cost quite a bit less than Bowers & Wilkins 804D4, their smallest 800 tower speaker. And yet the Audio Solutions offer you something that neither the Kef nor the Bowers do. And that is full customization of the speaker's finish, because this all anthracite black finish with brass trims was chosen by UK audiophiles in a competition ran by the AS UK distributor Elite Audio. And the winner of that competition, Brett Stevens, who learned about it from my video, I contacted him and asked him how he was getting on with his winnings, a pair of Figaro B2 stand mount speakers. And what he said I will tell you later in the video, and trust me, it's worth waiting for. Looking at the Figaro M2, initially they seem like fairly standard 3-way 4-ohm rear-ported tower speakers that are quite sizable and that have a fairly wide or quite a chunky baffle. These are definitely not your super slim style of tower speakers. But looks can be deceiving, because I didn't even realise until I was doing the video work right at the end that the cabinets are curved on their sides, which is pretty cool because it's not easy to see, and yet we know there are benefits to curved cabinets, such as a better management of internal standing waves and pressure. And probably the most interesting of the 4 drivers is the top one, the AS call the extended band mid-range driver. That is 6 inches with a paper cone, and it's responsible for frequencies between 400 Hz to 4 kHz. So that means it produces the lion's share of all vocals and mid-band information. And AS say they do this so that there is no crossover in the frequencies where humans have very sensitive hearing to distortions or phase shifts, such as crossovers can cause in the 1 to 2 kHz region. And I think about the concept of the same driver producing all of the vocals, and I have to think of the obvious benefit of that for a consistency of tonality. So that's interesting. However, I can't help but think about some other speaker manufacturers like Klipsch and Amphium that look to do something similar, but completely the other way. They cross over the tweeter very low, around 1.6 kilohertz. And there are some obvious benefits when you listen to those speakers, but I find that they can also make vocals sound a bit sharper and a bit crisper. And I don't always find that massively pleasing. And when I think about the concept of one paper driver doing all of the vocal region, there are some things about that I think that I should like, but it does raise the question mark. Can a 6-inch paper driver move fast enough to produce clear upper vocal frequency regions, or do they sound a little bit socks in the mouth, muffled? And no, they definitely don't hear from the Figaro M2, but the vocals are delivered with a certain unique character. Another not obvious at first design choice is the smaller than average Silk Dome tweeter that looks tiny because it is. It's 19mm or 0.7 inches. And I know that's huge for some men, but it's very small for a speaker this size. And AS say there is a mini horn in front of the tweeter that has a specific shape to help dampen the air pressure created by the tweeter to lower its distortion. And it gives the M2 a higher sensitivity of 91.5 dB, 2.83 volts at 1 meter. So that's where some of the flexibility starts to come in. And I asked AS about their crossovers, and they sent me a huge description, far too, in depth to go into in this video, but there's a lot of custom design approaches with the crossovers, taking a lot of things into account. They use high quality Janssen, I think is how you pronounce it, crossover components. They use air core coils where the windings are glued so that no micro movements can happen over time. And for 400 Hz and below, there are two 18cm or 7.2 inch ER paper-based drivers. And ER stands for extra rigid because the drivers have paper-made cones, but with extra hardening materials that AS say creates a stiffer and better piston. And dual 7-inch drivers would normally be on the smaller side of what I would find enough bass from a speaker in my particular listening room. But they do have quite a large cabinet here, or maybe there's a little bit of extra cabinet volume going on because the bass they deliver was, it exceeded my expectations. It was enough. It was satisfying enough for me, but I was, pushing them and working them really very hard. And speaking of the cabinets, it's a dual cabinet construction or a box in a box with a layer of viscous polyurethane in between the layers, with the idea of the viscous layer plus the outer heavier and more dense cabinet layer reduces vibrations and resonances. And AS told me that their cabinet design is looking to delay any other resonances that might be happening within the cabinet because everything resonates, of course. So the fact that those resonances are delayed, they become less invasive to the music that you hear, and you hear those resonances different. It's an interesting way to explain a cabinet design, and I don't think any other speaker designer's ever mentioned that to me before, but of course I have no way to really test this. If you do the tap test on the speakers, the top of the M2 is really very inert, it's really very hard and inert. However, if you tap the sides, you will find some sections of the speaker that sound more resonant or maybe a little bit more hollow than other parts, and I think that's to be expected some with a ported speaker. But this is definitely different. There's definitely more resonances going on here than with the Estelon Aura speakers that I had here at the same time. But the M2 definitely have a more overall inert cabinet than my reference speakers, the SVS Titans, but they only cost about half what the Figaro do, so take that into account. But what I think matters most is the overall sound profile of a speaker, and that is where the Figaro M2 appealed to me more than the Estelon Aura and more than my current owned reference speakers, the SVS Titans. The balance of sound from the Figaro M2 I think is better than the other two. And they cost starting from around £9,000 for the pair. However, this particular specification and finish costs around £11,000 for the pair. So this is a large chunk of hi-fi money, but far from crazy, like I said, given what other high-end end-game hi-fi speakers you might choose to buy. For setup, these are heavy speakers at 45 kilograms each, so it's quite a thing to lift them up and move them around. It's doable, but it's quite a thing, especially if you're trying to move them just a little bit, you know, to try and find the perfect position in the room. Fortunately, I found these really easy speakers to set up. I did what I always do. I put them on the T of the masking tape T on the floor because I know that's normally the perfect position for a speaker in this room. I towed them in quite a lot, thinking they have a soft dome tweeter and therefore, you know, on axis would be best. I listened to them and they sounded great, really great. However, I wanted a little more bass from them and I wanted to open up the central area of the soundstage, the space between the speakers. So I moved them back maybe an inch or so each and towed them out just a little bit. And that was it. That was enough. It took me, what, 10 minutes of total listening and setting up to be more than happy with their overall sound. So they seem very unfussy to set up for a high-end hi-fi speaker. And that's, again, where some of the flexibility comes in. And for amplifiers, I tested the M2 initially with two big and powerful Griffin integrateds, the Diablo 300 and the newer Diablo 333. Both were fantastic with these speakers, but the 333 was amazing with them, but it's a very expensive choice. But I took from this amplifier comparison that I was actually doing using the Figaros is that I was easily able to hear the differences, the clear differences between two exceptionally good integrated amplifiers from the same manufacturer. And that proved to me then how scalable the Figaro M2s are. So you could take the hi-fi system to quite extreme levels and you would still hear more benefits from the speakers. And that to me is a true marker of an end game hi-fi speaker. I also needed to test the speakers with more real-world priced amplifiers too. So I tried them with the Hi-Fi Rose RA180 GaNFET Class AD integrated and with the even more real-world priced Galleon TS34 tube amplifier. And both were a very obvious step down from the more expensive and bigger Griffins, as you would expect. But it didn't matter what amplifier I used, I still found the M2s to be very enjoyable to sit and listen to, just with quite different presentations. So that is again another tick in the flexibility box, and really this is a massive one in my eyes. But there were some overriding sonic traits of the M2 speakers that were always there regardless of the amplifier. And the first one I experienced or really stood out to me was the vocals delivery. Because like I said, it's like the superpower of these speakers, because vocals are a lovely balance or combination of energetic, lively, clear, detailed, really quite, I'm going to use the word vibrant a lot in this review, really like a vibrant, energetic, lively vocal that has an overriding smoothness to it, but not smoothed over, just smoothness. So vocals have like a lovely character, a really lovely character that really, it just stands out to you straight away about these speakers as being just that little bit different. And it was only at that point that I remembered, oh wow, these have got like a wideband mid-range driver. Then it hit home to me straight away, wow, it works, it makes sense. It's a really clever, well done design of the speaker. And with the right amplifier, the vocals can sound stunning for their clarity, with a lovely authentic timbre and rich warm tone. Vocals that are right up my street because of how the upper bass and lower mid-range region is so well integrated. And this great combination of vocal attributes, and in my head I'm thinking it's the integration between the bass drivers and the mid-range, but it might just be the mid-range driver doing it all itself, which is maybe where this special character comes from, is that we can have a lovely vocal that just kind of hovers and hangs in the air, like a lot of speakers can do really well, but it has this really energy and presence about it. And then definitely because of the bass and the way the bass integrates with the vocal, maybe because they're all paper drivers, it allows the vocal to have this really nice rounded 3D character to it that just rounds it off. It's not like this flat vocal thing. It's like a rounded 3D sounding vocal that always stands out to me when I hear it. Now, you can add that to a lot of speakers with subwoofers, like really good rails. That's what you can do with them. But the fact you don't need to add the subwoofers and you still get this really full rounded 3D vocal from just the speakers on their own, of course, that really stood out to me. And the second thing that jumped out to me about the M2 is their presence. And I don't mean treble region presence, I mean the presence of the whole sound. So it's a big speaker that sounds like a big speaker. What do I mean by that? I mean, when you sit and listen to music, every individual part of it sounds big, it sounds like it has presence, it sounds energetic, it sounds lively. So like it's a piano or a drum or a vocal, it doesn't really matter. It's all big, it all has presence in the room. So music is not just something you're listening to, it's something that's present in your room, something that you are experiencing. It just lifts the whole thing up just that bit more. And I find music far more engaging to listen to when it's like that. And I find myself getting into it more, my feet tap, my head bobs. And that's part of the reason why I was listening to more and more and more music, because everything's got this extra special character about it, this presence in the room. I just find more engaging, more enjoyable. But for the small or micro detail retrieval of music, the M2 definitely err on the side of caution, with a very smooth overall sound rather than being all about the small details. However, that is very much amplifier depending, because with the HiFi Rose, the high frequencies and the overall clarity was far more pronounced than with the Gallium tube amp, for example. So you can make the M2 sound more focused on the specifics, the small details of the music if you really want them to be, if you choose a hi-fi system that majors in that area. But I think they're better. I think they favour or sound a bit better when you don't do that, when you go with a hi-fi system or an amplifier that has a little bit more graceful ease about it. But that's a personal preference thing for me. You might prefer it the other way around, and you can quite easily go both ways with these speakers. Again, I really appreciate that flexibility. And even with only 25 Class A watts of the Gallium tube amp, it was enough for the M2 to give me a full and impactful, good quality, but still fun bass. But the bigger power amplifiers are tested, like the Griffin 333, got much more out of the M2 for bass power, scale, drive, and dynamics, as you would expect. But even being powered from the big Griffin amplifier, their bass was not as hitting or as kind of pressure feeling on me at the listening position as I get from the SVS Titan speakers, which is why I have those speakers here. Their bass is really excellent. But the bass from the M2 was still very full, it was very rounded, it was still very pleasing. It's what I call like a chewy bass, like you can touch it, it's thick, it's pleasing bass, not dry or mechanical. And they was close to being as heavy hitting as the Titan speakers, close enough. But their bass quality, the detail, the articulation, the way the bass forms in the room as individual notes, or as sometimes it can dance around in upper layers of the sound, that was all significantly better than what I get from the SVS Titans. The bass quantity the M2 delivers is probably just about perfect for this size of room, because there is enough of it in the important frequency regions to satisfy even a bass head like me for its impact. The spec sheet says extension to 30 Hz, but I think their output in the deepest bass is quite modest. Here is why that can be a good thing. This room I listen in has extensive acoustic treatment in it that I know is most effective to about 40 Hz. So when a speaker or a subwoofer has big output below 40 Hz, I can hear it because the decay time, the bass structure feels lingering. It feels more boomy, a little bit more boomy than 40 Hz and above. So the M2 could deliver, like I said, a satisfying, pleasing amount of fullness and impactful bass, the bass that you feel on your body with, heavy hitting electronic music. But they never hit the deepest bass notes with enough pressure to cause that lingering in the room. So it's like a clever trick, because you listen to music feeling like there's loads of bass and there's loads of deep bass, but there is enough where you need it, and there's not the bass where you don't want it that's going to cause the room to rumble. And like a 30 or a 35 Hz room mode is very common. It's very common. I've measured loads of rooms, speakers and rooms. It's very, very common. So a speaker that makes you feel like you're getting loads of deep bass, but actually is not triggering the room's problems, is a really nicely, cleverly balanced speaker. And it's a similar thing for the treble, because you might think that a small soft dome would be super soft sounding and maybe be lost with a speaker that has a big full sound, because sometimes it is, but not here. I think the balance of the treble again is just about right, because it's there. The treble detail is there. It's quite lively actually at times, and it can be very lively with the right amplifier like the HiFi Rose. But it's interesting because it's a treble that never grabs your attention. It never demands your attention, but you can focus your audio, focus on it, your audio attention on it, and all the treble details all there, and it's smooth and it's detailed and it's lively and it's sweet but it's not trying to grab your attention away from anything else. It's not trying to stand out. And I like that balance of treble personally, but of course, you know, if you want it more aggressive and attacking, maybe other speakers will suit you better. And lastly to speak about would be the soundstage. And the Figaro do not give you the pinpoint, crazy tight spatial accuracy of a speaker like the Estelon Aura. But they do soundstage fantastically well compared to the SVS Titans and a whole number of other speakers I have had in here. With excellent depth, sounds that are perceived behind the speakers, layered all the way out to the listening position with excellent positioning and spatial cues. And like I said earlier, everything within the soundstage has a lot of presence, it has a lot of energy, it has a lot of liveliness. So I think that gives music or a set of speakers or wherever you look at it, a hi-fi system, a lot of wow factor. So music has a real energy, a real liveliness, a real vibrancy about it. So it's really lively and energetic, but it's never forward. It's never forward sounding in any way. Even with an amplifier that's forward sounding, it always just errs on that side of caution to never be too forward sounding. So again, it's just a really nicely balanced overall speaker that's hitting on a lot of, pretty much all of the sonic traits that I deem most important. But what about negatives? Well, I think compared to a speaker like the Estelon Aura, you can hear where the M2 draw their soundstage with what I'm going to call like a Sharpie type of edge to the music, whereas a speaker like the Estelon Aura draw their soundstage or their musical information with more of a sharpened pencil type of edge. So like that sharpened pencil type of edge gives everything a bit more of a cutting sound, a bit more clarity in the positioning and a bit more kind of tight focus to the music, whereas the Sharpie edge of the music from the M2 means it has a bit more of a softer edge. It's not quite as clear cut as an overall delivery, but you know what, I actually prefer that. I find it a little bit more pleasing, a little bit more flexible again with the amplifier and the system that you choose. But depending on what sound you like, this is something to think about here. And I'm going to be very harsh here with this criticism because the Figaro speakers are built like tanks, so built very well. But there are some things with their design that definitely feels more boutique manufacturer to me, such as there being some obvious joins in the cabinet, and the top is oversized. And this is all fine and actually quite charming, but it does give a different first impression compared to a KEF reference speaker, for example, where its build feels a little bit more invisible and maybe a little bit more refined. But I don't know if that's necessarily the best word to use, but hopefully you get some idea from it. And that very much extends to the speaker's grills, which are like a quite hard type of design. I've not seen grills like this, I don't think, before. And again, they look really well made, but I just didn't like the way they connected to the speaker. Like the magnets connect to the trims on the front of the speaker. And it just didn't feel as solid and secure as I would like for a grill that's quite this big and quite heavy. And for some reason, it was just leaving little marks, like little circular marks on the trims that I had to keep cleaning off. So I think these were just triggering my OCD. There's nothing wrong with them, but I would leave these in the box if it was me personally. And then the outrigger design, like the feet, the legs for the speakers, they are made from wood, like a shaped piece of wood. And again, they're strong. I've moved these speakers a lot. They're heavy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. But when you touch them and when you install them, it doesn't feel quite as refined as even, say, KEF's R-series speakers that have this lovely metal piece, shaped metal piece that acts as the outrigger. So like I'm being really nitpicky here to find some negatives for the Figaros. Really nitpicking. Would any of this stop me buying these speakers? No, far from it. We definitely need to speak about the customization potential of the Figaro speakers, because this is definitely one of the standout things, because you can use an online configurator tool to pretty much fully customize the finish of the speaker that you want. And you can have a different front and back finish if you wish. There are different trim colors you can choose between and so much more, all intended for the owner to create the perfect speaker for them. And I've already created a whole video about this a couple of months ago, so I don't want to go over the whole thing again. If you'd like to know more, I'll leave a link to that video in the comments section down below. this is definitely not the finish that I would have chosen, and that is the whole point. That's the whole point of this customization. The owner can personalize the speaker to be exactly right for them, and I look at that as a great thing, because maybe you can sit there with your partner and you can design the finish of the speakers together so your speakers fit your home, or they just don't put out your significant other. And maybe that means you can have the bigger speakers that you really wanted because it's not going to upset your partner, and there's so many things that go along with this. To me, it's a really differentiating standout factor. And the configuration code for this particular M2 is on the screen now. So now you have seen how true to life the configurator tool is compared to, how the speakers will look in the flesh, as close as I can give you. And you can make your own mind up for the effectiveness of that. So to sum up this very long video, I think the Audio Solutions Figaro M2 are epically good hi-fi speakers for being balanced just about right across all of the important sonic traits I value. And they stand out to me in two critical areas: their vocals delivery and their bass quality. And those two areas really stand out to me about all audio in general. But this has all been just my opinion. What did Brett say about his Figaro B2 speakers? And I've got it written down here so I didn't get it wrong. So Brett wrote, "Hey Terry, good to hear from you. I am in awe of my Figaro B2s. I've had them now for about a month and they have surpassed all my expectations. Gorgeous mid-range, told you that's the first thing that stands out. Clean, punchy and detailed bass, and the highs are smooth and never harsh sounding. I can only imagine what their higher tiered speakers sound like. Would highly recommend these stand mounts." So there you go. That could have been my whole review, couldn't it? That's why I've saved it right to the very end. So there you go. Those are all of the reasons why I have named, or think that the Audio Solutions Figaro M2 are my speaker of the year 2024. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you have enjoyed it, I know it's been very long, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more.